I was raised to be the perfect daughter, the kind every parent dreams of. My father, a strict but loving man, always reminded me that a good name is better than riches. My mother, ever graceful, drilled the importance of dignity and patience into me. We were an average but respected family, known for our principles and strong moral values. Hello, family. Welcome to Storytime by Yuchelee. Please like and share this video to your friends and loved ones. Turn on post notifications for more videos. Sit back, relax as we dive into the story. I followed every lesson they taught me. I excelled in my studies, graduated with distinction, and landed a well-paying office job. Life was going according to plan. But there was one thing my parents had not quite prepared me for: love. At 24, I was still single, and the world was starting to take notice. My friends teased me. My aunts whispered at family gatherings. Even my mother, subtle as she was, had begun to drop hints. "A woman needs a good man by her side," she would say, watching me closely. I wasn't against marriage, but I had standards. I wanted someone who would love me for who I was, not just because I checked off the boxes of being wife material. I wanted a partner, not a master. I wasn't desperate, but I was waiting. And then, one fateful night, everything changed. It started as an ordinary evening. After a long and exhausting day at work, I had finally settled in for the night when I suddenly remembered something important. I had left my laptop at the office. The laptop contained critical files I needed for a report, and without them, I would be in serious trouble the next morning. With a sigh, I grabbed my car keys and headed back to the office. The drive there was uneventful. The streets were mostly empty, the hum of my engine the only sound breaking the silence. I quickly retrieved my laptop and got back into the car, ready to head home. That's when it happened. Just a few minutes into my drive, my car sputtered, jerked, and came to an abrupt stop. Panic shot through me. I tried turning the key again. Nothing. I checked my phone. 5% battery left. I stepped out of the car, looking around. The road was deserted, the streetlights dimly flickering like something out of a horror movie. A chill ran down my spine. I had always heard stories of people getting stranded in strange places, and they never ended well. My mind raced with terrifying possibilities. What if someone attacked me? What if no one came to help? I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Maybe I could flag down a passing car. Then, as if the universe had read my thoughts, I saw headlights approaching in the distance. The car slowed down as it reached me, and my heart pounded. I had no idea who was inside. The door opened, and a tall, well-built man stepped out. He looked to be in his early 30s, dressed casually in a fitted shirt and jeans. He had a strong but calm presence, his sharp eyes scanning my car before settling on me. "Hey," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "Are you okay?" I hesitated. Should I trust him? "My car just stopped," I said carefully. "I don't know what's wrong." He took a step closer, hands in his pockets. "Mind if I take a look?" I studied his face, searching for any sign of bad intentions. But something about him felt safe. I nodded. He popped the hood, inspecting the engine with practiced ease. A few minutes later, he turned to me and sighed. "It's not something that can be fixed right now. You'll need a mechanic." A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. "Oh, I see. Do you live far from here?" he asked. "Not too far," I said, though in reality, it was still quite a distance to walk alone at night. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, I know this might sound crazy, but it's really late, and I don't feel comfortable leaving you here alone. I can give you a ride home if you're okay with it." I hesitated. Every self-defense lesson I had ever heard screamed, "Don't get into a stranger's car." But something about him, I couldn't explain it. He didn't seem like the kind of person who would hurt me. "All right," I said softly. As we drove, I finally got the courage to ask, "What's your name?" "Daniel," he replied. "And you?" "Ava." "That's a beautiful name," he said with a small smile. I found myself smiling back. The ride home was smooth, and he didn't ask too many questions, just enough to keep a conversation light. When we reached my house, I turned to him, feeling genuinely grateful. "Thank you so much, Daniel. I don't know what I would have done without you." He nodded. Don't worry about your car. I'll call a mechanic first thing in the morning. I blinked. You don't have to do that. He chuckled. I know. But I want to. And, for the first time in a long while, my heart did a little flip. The next morning, true to his word, Daniel called a mechanic, paid for the repairs, and texted me that everything was taken care of. I was beyond grateful. I called him to say thank you, and somehow, that short call turned into a long conversation. And then another the next day. And another after that. Before I knew it, we were talking every day. At first, it was just check-ins, how's your day going, or hope you got home safe. But soon, our conversations grew deeper. He told me about his love for finance, his dreams of starting his own business, and his close bond with his mother. I told him about my strict upbringing, my career aspirations, and how I had always been too busy to think about relationships. Then one night, as we sat in a cozy cafe, he looked at me and said, I don't know what I was looking for before, but now I know. It's you. My heart pounded. And just like that, I realized I had fallen in love with him too. For weeks, everything felt perfect. We were happy, inseparable, and deeply in love. Then one evening, Daniel called me, his voice tense. I told my mom about you, he said slowly. A strange feeling settled in my chest. And, he sighed. She's not happy. I froze. She already had someone in mind for me, he admitted. And before I met you, I didn't care. I figured I'd just go along with it. But now, he exhaled sharply. Now I know that no one else can be you. A lump formed in my throat. What are you saying, Daniel? I'm saying I don't care what she thinks. I want to be with you. My heart swelled with love. But deep down I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Because Daniel's mother was not a woman who gave up easily. And she was about to make our love a living hell. Daniel's words echoed in my ears long after the call ended. I don't care what she thinks. I want to be with you. I should have been happy, right? The man I loved was choosing me over his mother's expectations. But instead of feeling relieved, I felt uneasy. I knew the battle was just beginning. And I was right. It started subtly. Daniel's mother, Mrs. Williams, didn't attack me outright. She started by dropping hints, trying to plant doubts in his mind. She's a nice girl, but is she really the right one for you? She asked him one evening. Daniel brushed it off. Mom, I love her. Mrs. Williams gave him a sad smile, shaking her head. Love is not everything, son. Compatibility, family background, and tradition matter too. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Ava is from a good family. She's well-educated, hard-working, and respectful. What more do you want? His mother's face darkened. I want what's best for you. And that was just the beginning. Soon she began calling me. At first she was polite, making small talk. But the conversations always ended the same way. You're a good girl, Ava, but you should think about Daniel's future. A mother knows what's best for her son. I tried to remain respectful, but deep down, I knew what she was doing. She wanted me to leave him. One evening, Daniel and I were at his apartment, sitting on the couch, going over wedding plans. We had already decided on a small, intimate ceremony, something simple and elegant. I was thinking we could check out that garden venue this weekend, I said excitedly, pointing at the pictures on my phone. Daniel smiled. That looks perfect. Just as I leaned in to show him another picture, the front door burst open. Mrs. Williams stormed in, her eyes blazing with anger. I stiffened. Daniel stood up immediately. Mom, what are you doing here? She ignored him and turned to me, her lips curling in disgust. So, you're the reason my son is disrespecting me? She spat. I blinked in shock. Ma'am, I don't understand. She stepped closer, eyes filled with rage. You bewitched him, didn't you? He was always an obedient son until you came along. Daniel stepped between us. Mom, that's enough. But she wasn't done. Turning to me, she sneered. Who do you think you are? You think you can just walk into our lives and take my son away from me? I was speechless. I had never been insulted like this in my life. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling. Mrs. Williams, I love your son. I've done nothing to hurt him. She let out a bitter laugh. Love? What do you know about love? Do you even know what it means to be a wife? To be part of a family? I felt a lump form in my throat. Why do you hate me so much? What have I done to deserve this disrespect? She raised her hand as if to slap me, but before she could, Daniel grabbed her wrist. His voice was sharp. Mom, don't you dare. She gasped, staring at him in shock. You would stop me? For hers? Daniel's jaw clenched. Yes. Because you're wrong. Mrs. Williams yanked her hand away, shaking with fury. You are making the biggest mistake of your life. Then she turned to me. You will regret this. With that, she stormed out. I stood frozen, my heart pounding. The room felt heavy with tension. Daniel turned to me, his face filled with guilt. Ava, I'm so sorry. I shook my head. I can't do this. His eyes widened. What? Tears welled up in my eyes. I love you, Daniel. But I can't be the reason you fight with your mother. He reached for me, but I stepped back. I need time, I whispered. Then I walked out of his apartment, leaving him standing there, shattered. The next few weeks were hell. I ignored Daniel's calls, his texts, everything. I knew he was hurting, but I was hurting too. I had never imagined loving someone would come with this much pain. My mother noticed my silence. One night, she sat beside me on my bed. Ava, tell me what's wrong. I took a deep breath and told her everything. She sighed, holding my hand. Marriage is not just about two people, my dear. It's about families. If his mother refuses to accept you, life will not be easy. Tears slipped down my cheeks. So what do I do, Mom? Walk away from the man I love. She squeezed my hand gently. That's something only you can decide. But fate made the decision for me. One day, Daniel's supposed fiancée, the girl his mother wanted him to marry, showed up at my office. I was shocked to see her. She looked worried as she sat across from me. I need to talk to you, she said. I crossed my arms. What do you want? She sighed. Look, I never wanted to marry Daniel. I agreed because of his mother, but I've seen the way he looks at you. His heart belongs to you. I felt my throat tighten. She leaned forward. He's not eating. He's not sleeping. He's getting weaker every day. I swallowed hard. That's not my fault. She gave me a sad smile. Maybe not. But you're the only one who can fix it. I stayed silent, my heart pounding. 3 days later, I got a call. It was Daniel's mother. Her voice was shaking. Ava, please. My son is in the hospital. He hasn't eaten or drunk anything since you left. He's dying. Tears blurred my vision. Please, she sobbed. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Just please save my son. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling. Without a second thought, I grabbed my bag and rushed to the hospital. When I entered his hospital room, I gasped. Daniel looked terrible. His face was pale, his body frail. He had lost so much weight in just a few weeks. His eyes fluttered open when he heard my voice. Ava, he whispered. I rushed to his side, grabbing his hand. I'm here, Daniel. I'm here. A small, weak smile appeared on his lips. And for the first time in weeks, he took a sip of water. Mrs. Williams stood at the doorway, watching us, tears running down her face. She stepped closer, her voice breaking. I was wrong, Ava. Please forgive me. I looked at her, seeing the pain in her eyes. And in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't my enemy. She was just a mother who loved her son too much to let him go. I nodded. I forgive you. And just like that, the war was over. Daniel recovered within days, and a month later, we got married. This time, his mother stood by my side, smiling as we exchanged vows. Love had won. Our wedding day was nothing short of magical. The tension that had once clouded our love was gone. Daniel's mother, Mrs. Williams, stood by my side, holding my hands as the priest pronounced us husband and wife. Tears glistened in her eyes as she whispered, "Welcome to the family, my daughter." I had won her over, not by force, but by love, patience, and time. Daniel squeezed my hand, his smile brighter than the sun. I told you nothing would keep us apart. I smiled back. And I told you I needed time. Now, we had forever. Our first few months as a married couple were beautiful, yet challenging. Marriage was not just about love, it was about compromise, communication, and commitment. One morning, I woke up to the smell of something burning. I rushed to the kitchen and found Daniel standing over the stove, staring helplessly at a charred omelet. He turned to me, looking guilty. "I was trying to make you breakfast." I burst into laughter. "Daniel, you almost burned down the kitchen." He grinned sheepishly. "Well, at least I tried." I pulled him into a hug, my heart swelling with love. It was moments like these that reminded me why I had fought so hard for our love. We were not perfect, but we were perfect for each other. One evening, just as we were settling down to watch a movie, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Williams. "Mom," I answered, surprised. She usually didn't call, so late. Her voice trembled. "Abe, Daniel's father collapsed. We're at the hospital." My heart stopped. "We're coming." Daniel and I rushed to the hospital, our hands tightly clasped together. When we arrived, we found Mrs. Williams pacing the hallway, her eyes red from crying. Daniel grabbed her shoulders. "Mom, what happened?" She sniffled. "He had a heart attack. The doctors are doing everything they can." Daniel's grip on my hand tightened. I could feel his fear, his pain. Hours passed, each second heavier than the last. Finally, a doctor stepped out. "He's stable," he announced. We let out a collective sigh of relief. Mrs. Williams turned to me, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for being here." I hugged her. Family always stands together. That night, I realized something. I was no longer just Daniel's wife. I was part of something bigger, a family that had once rejected me but now embraced me wholeheartedly. Months passed, and life settled into a beautiful rhythm. One morning, I felt strangely tired. At first, I thought it was stress, but then the nausea hit. Something clicked in my mind. Could it be? I rushed to the pharmacy and bought a pregnancy test. Minutes later, I stared at the 2 pink lines, tears filling my eyes. I was pregnant. When Daniel came home that evening, I held up the test, unable to speak. His eyes widened. "Are you serious?" I nodded, tears streaming down my cheeks. He let out a joyful laugh, lifting me off the ground. "We're going to be parents." That night, we sat on the bed, dreaming about our baby's future. "I hope they have your eyes," I whispered. Daniel smiled. "And your heart." When we told Mrs. Williams, she burst into tears. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Ava, you have made me the happiest woman alive," she sobbed. I smiled, my heart swelling with warmth. Months later, when I went into labor, Mrs. Williams was the first person to arrive at the hospital. She held my hand through every contraction, whispering words of encouragement. And when our baby girl was born, she cradled her with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. "She's perfect," she whispered. Daniel kissed my forehead, his eyes filled with pride. "You did amazing, Ava." I smiled weakly, exhaustion washing over me. But as I watched Mrs. Williams rock our daughter to sleep, I knew. Every fight, every tear, every moment of doubt had been worth it. Because love had won, and it would continue to win forever. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.